All right, let's get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the talk on animations. If you guys have been using Windows Phone, you probably already love the fast and fluid animations that you see on there. And today we'll talk about how you can have the same animations in your applications so that your applications look beautiful, alive, and responsive, and you get great reviews. I'm Kunal. I'm a program manager on the Windows Phone developer team, and I've been working on the UX controls and animation space for the past couple of releases. Joining me here today is my colleague Rohan, who'll be helping out with the demos. Thanks, Rohan.
So I'm Rohan. I have been on the Windows XAML platform team, and I was on the XAML for Windows Phone since 7.5, and ever since I've been working on XAML for controls.
We'll also be giving out these headphones at the end of this talk. We'll have a question for you, and that's how we'll pick somebody up. So let's start off with a really nice-looking video of a cool animation in an app. So this was a video done by our motion design team. You can see this is a really nice-looking animation. It's graceful, it's smooth, it gives you a sense of directionality, and it brings the focus of the user to the right places on the screen. So you can see the points changing, the tiles flipping. So this is an example, this is a representative of what a great animation can look like in an app. Let's talk about the goals today. These are very simple. First, we'll talk about how to identify the signature animations. Now, as a user, when you use the Windows Phone, you see a lot of animations in there, but you're not able to break them down and call them by individual names. So as app developers, it would help us if we can call out them by names and identify each one of those. So we'll talk about that. And then we'll try to understand the scenarios. Where should we use each one of these animations in our apps? And obviously, this is a dev conference, so we'll talk about what code you need to write. And as you will see, it's pretty easy. So let's first talk about why animations are so important for the user experience. So let's start with some stories from the top news websites. So here's the word saying, iPhone and iPad users report severe motion sickness while using iOS 7. And then the Time had the same thing. iOS 7 making you dizzy? Here's why and a fix. So this kind of gives you an idea of how crucial animations can be to the user's experience. Before we jump into the code, I want to talk a little bit about what are the kind of things, counter arguments against the use of animation in apps, and what kind of makes an animation great for use in an app. So I've heard from a lot of people that animations, they just make your apps feel slow. Now, the thing is, with animations, timing is crucial. So you can have this same piece of text come in fast, still draw users' attention, and not look boring. Another thing I've heard is animations are annoying. And this reminds me of the early days of web when we used to have this blinker on top, which would flash. Now, unless we want to make an app to distract a baby or hypnotize someone, I would not recommend using this kind of an animation. If you really want to draw users' attention, you can have a nice once pulsation, and that's it. And we'll not even talk about what it takes to make an animation nauseating. We just saw the news reports. Now let's look at some of the key traits of a great animation for an application. One is fluidity. You probably already see this on Windows Phone. When you move from one content to another, it should seem very smooth, buttery, and very seamless. Another is context. Sometimes an animation exists to provide the user context. An example of this on the Windows Phone is the continuum animation, and we'll talk about it. You might have seen this when you click on an email, and then you see the text fly out and fly in as you go to see the details of that email. It provides you that context, that continuity. Another important aspect is subtle feedback. So especially for animations, which provide the user some kind of a feedback in terms of an action that they took, a subtle feedback is very important. And you might notice this with the tilt effect that we have on phone. A lot of users don't even consciously notice that there is an animation there. But when it goes missing, they definitely feel that something is not there. And obviously, let's not forget about the emotional appeal. These are all the functional aspects that we talked about. But at the end of the day, like we saw in the first video, there were these arcs that were expanding. An animation like that primarily exists to provide an emotional appeal, and that could be suited to your application. So after all this talk about what makes animations great and how they're good for applications, let's look at a demo here of an app with and without animations and see how it feels different. So over to Rohan for that.
So you guys must have seen this app in Sean Oster's talk yesterday and in Stefan Beck's talk. We are using this as an example everywhere. So on the right, you will see GolfLink app with beautiful animations. And on the left, you will see the app without animations. And some animations will be intrinsic and already part of the controls. So on the left, you will see them too. So let's look at both. People who have not seen this app, I'll just scan through so you get familiarized with the app. So on the right, we have beautiful animations. Notice the tilt effect on the control. Indicates that there is something you can tap on. On the left, we don't have that, which does not let the user know that you can tap on something. Now let's look at one of the pages. The page just shows up with the default continuum page animation. On the right, you see the nice staggering effect of each item. People, like if you did not catch that, let's see that again. The items come in a staggered manner. Now let's go, this is a very common scenario. You have a list and you want to go into the details page. Again, simple navigation on the left. On the right-hand side, Addie Watkins flies out and flies in. This retains the context between the two pages. You will see that in the Outlook app on the phone. And we'll be talking about more of these animations, and Kunal will deep dive into them.
Yep.
And on the right-hand side, you will see a 5-star app, and on the left-hand side, you will see a 4-star app. This is a subtle difference that, that can help you with the ratings.
So after all this talk about animations and how they make apps great, you might be wondering, how much work do I need to do to get these animations in my app? The good news is, not a lot. What we've done is we've created this library of animations for you. And this library of animations is a set of signature animations. For animations that are on the phone that you've already seen and loved, and we've made this available to you. And these have been designed by our motion experts. They've painstakingly got the timing right, and they look and match what you see on the operating system. And best of all, it's super easy to use, as you'll see in the upcoming slides. Now, as we jump into the code, I want to briefly talk about theme transitions and theme animations. These are not base classes, but for those folks who have already worked on Windows 8 and Windows 8.1 XAML apps, you might be familiar with these concepts. So these are the suffixes that you would commonly find in animation classes, which are part of the signature animation library. Let's look at a couple of examples. So one is the navigation theme transition. This is something that we've added to the phone. This does not exist on Windows 8.1. Another one is the pop-up theme transition. This exists both on Windows Phone and Windows 8.1, though the animations look different. But the API is the same. And then we have the reorder theme transition. Again, this API is common to both platforms, and the animations look pretty similar too. And all of these derive from the transition base class, which is, again, common to Windows Phone and Windows 8.1. So theme animations are slightly different from theme transitions. These transitions here that we just talked about, these are all automatically triggered by the system. You don't have to trigger them from your application code based on an event. So when you do a navigation, the navigation theme transition will automatically kick into play. An example of the theme animation is the pointer up and down theme animation. Again, this API exists both on Windows 8.1 and Windows Phone. The animations look different, but the way you use the API is exactly the same. And then we have the fade-out theme animation. Again, the animation looks same. We have the same API on both. And the theme animations, they derive from the timeline base class, which is, again, common to both Windows Phone and Windows 8.1. So let's look at some code here of how you use theme transitions and theme animations. So in theme transitions, generally, let's say you have a UI element, and it has a transitions property on it, and which will take in a transition collection. And inside of that, you can put one or more transitions. So an example of this is list view. So we ourselves, as platform developers, use the same concepts. And this is behind the scenes look of how we have built the list view. So this is the key list control in XAML. So if you open up the default style of list view by going to blend, right-clicking, and saying edit a copy of the template, you will find that it has this code in there which says item container transitions. Inside of that, you have the transition collection, and then you'll find two transitions in there, one of which is the reorder theme transition. And this transition kicks into play automatically when you do a reorder on list view. So let's look at a video of how that looks. So you can see the user is dragging an item down and reordering, and there's some animations that are happening. And these animations that are coming in, these are coming in, thank you. These are coming in from that code that I just showed you in the previous slide. So we are using the same mechanism that we are offering to you. Let's look at a code example of theme animations. Now, as I told you, theme transitions are slightly different from theme animations. In a theme animation, you still have this signature animation, but inside your code, for example, here in the stack panel, you'll have resources, and then you have a storyboard, in this case, the My Storyboard. And you specify inside of that the fade-out theme animation that you want to use. And obviously, the fade-out theme animation takes a target, which is a rectangle in this case. And this rectangle is defined here, right inside the stack panel. Now, what code that you do not see here is how this animation will get triggered, because there is no system event like for a theme transition for navigation. There is a system event, the navigation. For a theme animation, there is no system event to trigger it. But it's very simple. For the storyboard class, there is the method called begin. So all you'll do is in your code behind, you'll refer to your storyboard, which is my storyboard here, and call begin on it. And as soon as you do that, this animation will start playing on the rectangle. It'll fade out. So that's it for theme animations. Now let's start looking at the actual animation APIs that we are making available to you. So we'll start off with the page navigation theme transitions. If you have been using Windows Phone, you must have seen there are different types of animations that play when you navigate from one page to another. So let's assume you have two pages, page A and page B, and you want to navigate forward from page A to page B. And let's say you wanted to do a slide animation. And we'll show you code examples and demo videos of how this looks like. So let's say you want, when you go from page A to page B, that this navigation does a slide transition. Then all you need to do is on page B, you specify that you want a slide navigation transition. The cool thing is the system will automatically make sure that both the pages in this navigation play the right animations, going forward and backward. And also that this transition from one page's animation to the another page's animation happens very smoothly. So you don't have to do any work except for specify what animation you want. So let's look at the code that you need to write to get that slide navigation transition. So at the top of your page, you'll have the page.transition specified in your XAML, which will have a transition collection again. And inside of that, you will specify the navigation theme transition. Now, the navigation theme transition is slightly different from the other theme transitions because there's different types of navigation theme transition that you can have. So what we have done is, inside the navigation theme transition, there is a property called the default navigation transition info. And for the stuff that you saw in the previous slide, what you'll do is specify the slide navigation transition info inside of this. And that's it. And this code is pretty common. Like, you'll write the same code. You'll mostly change the stuff that's highlighted in there. So what are the different types of transitions that we've added for navigation? There are three: common, slide, and the continuum. Let's look at a video of what the common looks like. You're probably familiar with this if you've been using the phone. So that was going in, coming back out.
Again.
Let's look at one more time in case you missed it. So it's a turnstile in and turnstile out. The cool thing with the common navigation transition is that you don't have to write any app code for this. By default, in your Windows Phone XAML app, the pages will do this transition when you navigate from one page to another. It is set in the default root frame, so you can still take it out if you want to. But generally, you will not take it out in the root frame. What you'll do is, in your XAML for the page where you want to override this, you'll specify the other type of navigation transition that you want. For example, we showed you the slide navigation transition. But there is a variation of this, which looks a little different. So if you have Y-ordered content or lists, then you can have each item in there stagger a little bit and looks much more prettier in those cases. Let's look at a video for that. So you can see the list comes in, and the items are staggered in as they come in. So it's still the turnstile. Let's look at it one more time. But each element staggers a little bit. So you have to write a little bit of code for that. And next up, we have a demo. Rohan will show us what code we need to write to get this working in our apps.
So on the right, again, we have the emulator with beautiful animations. I think I want to turn it off, and we can focus on the left just to prove that I'm doing the right thing. This one does not have tilt. And on the right, we had the tilt. And I want to turn this off so we can focus on how to make this one better. So, yeah. I'm sorry, what?
Can we have the demo show up on this?
Okay.
Probably they know how to do it.
Okay. So we have this is our app, and players was the list, if you guys remember, where you go into the page and you would expect staggering of the list. In this case, we just have a basic continuum animation, the common navigation info, and what we'll do is we'll go ahead and add the staggering effect on this. Let's go to the page B where we want the animation. So all we have to do is put in the common navigation transition info out here, and make sure we enable the is staggering is enabled to true. Then we need to go and set which elements are we staggering exactly. So if you guys remember, it was the name, actually each list item. So on the root of the list item template, what I'll do is I'll say common navigation transition equals dot is staggering element equals true. And this is it for the list view level. Now, I also want the staggering effect on the pivot header and the pivot title. Pivot item title, I meant. So this was the pivot title where I added the staggering. It's an attached property. And on the pivot item header itself, I add the staggering. I also want to add it on the group headers that you see in the list. So I'll go ahead and find the group header template and add it to it. And this is enough to have the staggering effect. Let's go ahead and run it. That's it. That was simple code.
So just a couple of tags in XAML, and you have this effect, just the way you like it, customized to your needs. So next, let's talk about the slide navigation transition. And let's see what the video looks like for this. So the page slides up and slides down. Let's look at it one more time, because it's kind of quick. Slides up, and on backing out, slides down. So you might have noticed, in this case, in page A to page B, the page B was doing the slide animation, coming up and going down. The page A doesn't do any animation. So this is intended, because we intend this to be a fast transition. So if you want a fast in, fast out kind of a page navigation transition, this is what you would go for. A good place to use this is the leaf node pages. So if you have like an end page where you don't navigate forward from, but you just have users land in, look at some stuff, go back out, this is a great animation to use there. And if you've been using the Facebook app on Windows Phone, you're probably familiar with this. This is what comes up when you have the comments page show up. So you go in there, have the comments show up, you type in a comment, and you back out. So great animation for that. So let's look at how you can get this in your app too, a code demo for that.
Again, these demos are very simple because we made it all in the framework so that you can easily have it on your page. So let's look at the My Statistics page. This was, again, common navigation, simple animation that is available for all pages by default. But I know that this is going to be a quick in and out kind of page, so I want to make it a slide-in animation. So what I'll do is I'll go to that page, My Statistics XAML, and on there, instead of common navigation transition this time, what I'll do is I will add slide-in that he had in one of the slides earlier before. And this is good enough to have the beautiful slide-in animation. That's it.
So as you can see, it's super simple to use these animations. So last up, as far as page navigation transitions go, let's talk about the continuum, which is kind of a very interesting animation. Let's start off with the video again. So you can see the text flies out and flies into the next page. Let's see it one more time. So the text flies out, flies in. So this animation for page transitions is a great one to have if you want to provide some kind of context. So on the phone, if you already have the operating system, this might be something that you see when you go into the email app. You click on an email, and the text flies out and flies in on the next page, so you can get a sense of continuity. This is something that you also see on the contacts list. So in the contacts list, if you go and tap on a contact, you see the name of the contact fly out and then fly in on the next page where the details of the contact are listed out. So for those kind of scenarios, we recommend that you use this animation. And let's go ahead and look at a demo for what you need to get this going in your app.
So this was on the players list, and when you go from the list item to the list details, you want the beautiful continuum animation. So what you'd again do is you go ahead and go to the page B, which was the second page. That was the players details page, and specify the animation that you want on that page. So the same block of code, and instead of common navigation, this time you would say continuum navigation, and you will specify which element needs to fly in on this page. And you do that by identifying the element. In our case, it was the pivot title. And you specify whether it's an interest element or not. And this is good enough for page B. But on page A also, which was the page where we were clicking to navigate to this page, you need to specify which element was flying out. And let's go back to the players page and go to the list where we want the name to fly out. And this is the list item template. And here we specify that this is the flying is exit element equals true. After that, for performance reasons, we also need to specify which container is providing the fly-in effect. So we will go into the list view itself and add another attached property out there calling exit element container equals true. And this much code is good enough to have the beautiful fly-in, fly-out animation.
So this exit element container is basically a hint to this system that it does not need to pass the whole XAML to figure out if there is an exit element in there. So if it sees that this is an exit element container, it'll go dig deeper.
Let's look at it. That's it.
So that's it. Pretty simple again. Before we move on from the page navigation transitions, I want to briefly talk about an override that we added to the frame.navigate call. So for those who have already been using Windows 8.1, you might have seen this override because it exists there also. What we did was we added this extra parameter, which is the navigation transition info. So the scenarios that we thought of when we introduced this was, let's say as we talked in all the cases, there was a page A and a page B. And what you specified on page B is the type of navigation transition that will take place. But in some cases, it might happen that the page A might want to override what page B has specified as the default, and then you can use this. So what you would do is, let's assume that from page A to page B, the slide navigation transition happens. But let's say there's another page, Q. When you navigate that from that page to page B, let's say it wants to do the common navigation transition. All you need to do is create an object of the common navigation transition and then pass it in when you're calling the frame.navigate to get to page B. If you do that, even though there is a slide navigation transition that is specified on page B, it will instead do the common navigation transition because that was what was passed in from the first page while doing the frame.navigate call. Another example that we thought of, the scenario that we thought of where you might want to use this is the exit element that you just saw in the demo that was specified in XAML. It might be that you are noticing the taps, the presses that happen on your page in your code behind. And when in your code behind, you want to specify what is that exit element that flies out in a continuum animation. So in that case, what you would do is you would create a continuum navigation transition object, and inside of that, the exit element property, you can set that from your code behind. And when you pass that into frame.navigate call, whatever you specified there in that object is what's going to fly out. So we don't expect you to use this very commonly. Most of your requirements should be met by the XAML APIs that we have, the XAML tags that we have. But in some cases, in case you need it, you can go ahead and use this for a more powerful system. So that is all about the page navigation transition. Let's look at the other animations that we've introduced for you guys. So the pop-up theme transition. This API exists on Windows, but it looks very different on Windows Phone. So let's look at a couple of videos. So here's a jump list. When it shows up, it does the reader board. And on the right side, you'll see a content dialog show up with the same animation. Let's look at one more time, just in case somebody missed the jump list. So this is an animation that you're probably, again, familiar with. This is what the apps list does right now on Windows Phone, though we made a few tweaks to this animation and how it looks. And the cool thing about this pop-up theme transition is it's the same API that's on Windows. It's built into a lot of controls by default. So the jump list that you just saw, the content dialog, any flyout-based controls that require it, wherever we thought it made sense, we have built this into the framework. So you don't have to do any work there. But in some cases, let's say you create a new flyout-based custom control, and you want to use this animation. It is there available for you to use. Let's talk about the pointer up and down theme animation. If anyone here has worked on Windows Phone Silverlight before, and they have used the Silverlight toolkit, this might be familiar to you as the tilt animation. This is what you see when you press down on any control that can be pressed. It tilts. What we did is, for this XAML framework, we've kept the API same as what you have on Windows for the same scenario. So it's the same API, the same way you would write the code. But it looks different on the phone. It does a different animation. This is already built into controls. So for a button or a list view item, the things that we generally expect that users can press is, again, built in. Though there are scenarios when you have your own custom control that can be pressed by a user, and you want to have the same animation there, then you can add the pointer up and down theme animation to your custom control. And we'll have a quick look at what it looks like to write that code.
So it's the same app again. And what we have, first I want to show how the intrinsic controls already have the tilt effect. So wherever we anticipated that a user will click and you want an action associated with it, we have already added the tilt effect. It's very subtle, so please pay attention to the letters D. I'm pressing on the D, and the entire control tilts for an action. That's a hyperlink text button, hyperlink button, and already has the tilt effect. But on the second section of the hub, I have a control which is a basic grid control, grid element, and I have items inside of it, and I want to have an action associated with it. It does not have tilt effect on it. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and add tilt effect, and I'll show you guys how to do that. So it's a custom user control, which is shared between Windows and Windows Phone. And what I'll do is I'll add visual states to it. Pressed visual state and normal visual state. In the pressed visual state, I'll specify the pointer down theme animation, and in the normal visual state, I'll specify the pointer up theme animation. Then in the code behind, I will call goto states for pointer pressed and pointer release. There's a bunch of places where you need to do this, because if it is inside of a scroll viewer, you don't get the right events. So you need to specify all of these on pointer press, on pointer release, on got focused, and in each of these events, you need to change the visual state accordingly, whether it's pressed or not. And it is as simple as you specify go to state to a pressed one or a normal one. And this much code is good enough for that particular control to have a tilt effect on your custom areas in the app. That's it.
So this animation is a great example of the subtle feedback that we were talking about. It's very subtle, but it adds a really nice touch to the control. Next up, let's talk about the slide-in for the pivot. So if you've been playing around with the pivot on phone, and when you slide in from left to right, you can see that contents inside of that pivot nicely ease in, and they maintain a sense of directionality. So the direction that you move, they come in from that direction. So it looks really nice. The content changes look graceful, and obviously, it gives you a sense of direction. And what we've done is that we made it available to you as a pivot.slideIn animation group API. And we have made 3 levels of staggering available. So the reason we have 3 levels of staggering available is because we thought that anything more than that would lead to a very confusing UI where you have a lot of animations happening. So that's about it. It's very simple. Let's look at a demo here, how you get that in your pivot.
So this is a very subtle animation, and to demonstrate what I'll do is I'll just change the font colors to red. Hopefully it's visible. Can you guys see it? The red second line. Okay. So when you go from one pivot item to another pivot item, you don't see any animations on those red sub-items, sub-texts inside of each list. What I want to do is I want to have a nice slide-in animation on these things. And what I mean by that is you go onto the player's page again, and inside each of those elements, I will specify pivot.slideIn group. So because this is the first text, I will say, yeah, this belongs to the first group. And now we have a second text which belongs to the second group. And then, similarly, you'll add this attached property to other items, which are the subtexts. Group, personal, yeah, this one. Now you'll notice how when you go from one pivot item to another pivot item, it is very beautiful, other than the font color. Can you guys see it? And it also maintains a directionality. So if I go from one direction to another direction, the slide-in is different. And it was so simple to add that effect.
So this is an example of the kind of animations that add kind of a emotional appeal to your application and the UI. So this was the set of APIs that we have added, the kind of stuff that you have to write code against to get animations in your apps. Still very simple. And next, I want to talk about some of the built-in animations that we have introduced. You don't have to write any code for this. This comes built in. There is no API for this. But I thought it would be nice to let you know that when you use some of our controls, these animations would automatically happen for you. So the ones that I want to talk about one is the compression effect. We also call it the accordion. And this happens when you have a scrollable control and you try and go past the edge. So you will see everything squished down a little bit. So it happens in all the scrollable controls by default. The other one is the page rotation animation. So if you had built apps in Windows Phone Silverlight, and you try to change the orientation, you would see the content snaps into the new orientation, but there is no animation. Whereas on the operating system, all the apps did a nice crossfade. So what we've done is, in the Windows Phone XAML platform, we've introduced this animation. So when the orientation changes, your content will nicely crossfade into the different orientations. And the next one up is the menu flyout. When you bring up the menu flyout, you'll see there's a nice line that comes up. The menu flyout pops up, and the background kind of compresses down a little bit. And so these animations, there's no API, comes built into the control. And let's look at the videos of what these look like. So first one up is the menu flyout animation. So you can see it comes up, the page does an animation in the background, and now it will go away. So you press back, it goes away, the page comes back in. This is built in. The next one is the compression animation that I talked about. So the user tries to scroll, and you can see the text is getting squished. This is built into the list and other scrollable controls. Let's do it one more time, just in case somebody missed it. So you can see the text gets getting squished at the very bottom. And last one up, the built-in rotation animation. So this was done in an emulator, so you'll see the phone quickly jumps, but generally when you have your device in hand, you will not be able to turn that quickly, but you can see it turns, and the rest of the content nicely crossfades into the new orientation. Let's play it one more time. So you change, and now the content crossfades. And if you, even right now, if you open up your Windows Phone and go to the settings and try to change the orientation, you will see the same animation happening. And now it's available for you in your applications. So before we close up, I want to talk about the animation API convergence a little bit. There was many times during the talk when I mentioned that this animation is also available on Windows. And sometimes the animation looks different. Sometimes we recommend that you don't use the Windows animation on phone because the animation design is slightly different. So I want to give you a breakdown of the recommendations from our design studio. So the first elliptical that you see here, the blue one, is a set of animations that exist on Windows 8.1. These are also available on Windows Phone because we have a converged platform. But at this point, we recommend that you not use these on Windows Phone. An example of this is the entrance theme transition. So the entrance theme transition is used on Windows when you want to bring in new content. The form factor is different. There's a lot of content on screen, so you can individually pop in and out individual pieces of content and use the entrance theme transition for that. On the phone, what generally happens is you have less real screen estate, and generally, if you want to show different content, you navigate to a different page. So the corresponding animation that you would generally want to use on the phone for this is the page navigation theme transitions. So this is the list of APIs that we recommend you do not use. So this next purple elliptical, this is the set of animation APIs that are available on both Windows 8.1 and Windows Phone, and it's fine to use these on either of those. The animations might look different, but the API is the same, and it's okay to use on both platforms. So the example of this is the pointer up and down theme animation that we talked about. This is the tilt effect on phone. It does a different animation on Windows. And the next one up is the set of animation APIs that are only available on Windows Phone 8.1. They are not available on Windows 8.1. So that's the navigation theme transition that we talked about, the 3 types of navigation theme transition, the transition info objects, and the pivot.slide-in animation group, because pivot only exists on Windows Phone. So this is where we stand today. All of these APIs are available on Windows Phone 8.1, but the recommendation is to use the ones from the purple and the orange ellipticals. So with that, I'd like to end this talk. To just give you a quick recap, animations make for great user experiences. And what we've done is we've created this signature library. You can go ahead, it's easy to use, and you can make your apps great. Your feedback is really important to us, so go ahead, give us feedback. We'll really look into it. And just to end, we can take any questions here, and I'll probably ask you a question to give out these headphones. So the question is, can somebody call out what were the two key criteria when you might want to use the frame.navigate override?
Something simpler.
One criteria? Okay, I saw you first, so I'll ask you. Right. Right. Absolutely. You're right, and you're the proud owner of these headphones. So now we'll take any questions that you might have. Congratulations.
Hi, Justin Angel. Quick question on
Justin.
this. Are any of these fancy new animations supported on Windows Phone 8.1 servlet apps, or are they Apex Windows Phone 8.1 XAML apps only?
That's a great question.
Thank you.
These animations only work on Windows Phone XAML apps. For Windows Phone Silverlight, you have the option to use the Silverlight toolkit as it was in the past. Some of these animations are not available on Windows Phone Silverlight toolkit, but I'm not sure what the plans are of introducing these animations for Windows Phone Silverlight.
So the official guidance is if I want cool animations for Windows Phone 8.1 servlet apps or 8.0 apps, I should keep using the Silverlight toolkit.
That's the option that you have right now.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Hi. I have a question regarding page transitions. If we take, for example, the slide transition on iOS, what happens if I'm going from page A to page B? Page B will do its animation over page A, and you still see page A until page B is completely over it. It's a really nice animation. On Windows Phone, what I have experienced is that the animation begins by hiding completely page A, and then page B comes into the frame slowly until
Yes.
the animation is done. And to me, that animation kind of breaks the experience a little bit. I would like to know if there are improvements in that area.
That's a very keen observation, and that's definitely one of the things we have had on our planning to have it the way you were describing, that the page does not hide in the background, but it just comes over on top of it. Due to time and resource constraints, we were not able to do that, but definitely that's something that we also have noticed and would like to do it at some point, yes.
Okay.
But I'm not sure if when that would happen.
Okay, and would this be an improvement that could come into the toolkit maybe, or if it comes, it will be in Windows Phone next version?
So right now, as far as the toolkit planning is concerned, I'm not sure what the toolkit plans are. As far as your question about whether it's possible on the toolkit, that's something I'll have to go and follow back up on with my engineers, because they'll be able to tell whether it's something that's, so the toolkit generally works on the public API surface. So I'll have to talk to them to figure out whether this is possible on just doing on the public API surface,
okay,
or it requires some changes to the platform code. So based on that, we'll have to evaluate.
Okay.
If it is possible on the public API surface, we'll definitely think about providing some sort of solution.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so this was a really good session. However, according to the session description, you're also supposed to talk about custom transitions and animations.
So again, good question. And we have a great answer. So as far as custom animations go, they are the same as was available on that is available on Windows 8.1 and Windows XAML framework, the same set of APIs for custom animations, which are very similar to what you had in Silverlight, and which were kind of similar to what you had in WPF. So it's the same lineage carrying across, but if you want to understand the exact set of APIs for custom animation, it is exactly the same as Windows 8.1, Windows 8.0. Thank you.
Is there a way to extend the animations, like if there is a staggering effect and I want to add timing, like take like a couple seconds and not restrict to what it is doing?
At this point, it's not available because these animations are curated by a motion design team, and they generally try to keep the timing which they think is right and that has been used on the operating system in every other place, which is exactly the same timing. But that's definitely a good feedback for the future.
Or even like extending those classes to make our own, like add those attached properties to those animations. Or are they sealed?
It's right now it's not possible, but I think that's a good piece of feedback that we'll take back. That if you want to derive from this and make a subset or customize it, it should be possible, but we'll have to look into it.
Okay, one more question. In the Windows Phone build app, when we add it to the schedule, I don't know if it's an animation or a custom control. When we scroll to the schedule, the top timing bar stays until the next time slot's up. Is that an animation or a custom control? Do you know that?
It's called sticky headers.
Sticky
we refer
headers?
to it.
Yes.
Sticky header?
Yes, that is available in our default list view control. So if you use the Windows Phone XAML platform, so there's two platforms, the Windows Phone XAML or Windows Phone Silverlight. If you, so in either of those, if you use the long list selector in Windows Phone Silverlight or the list view in Windows Phone XAML, you'll get the sticky headers.
Oh, it's a sticky
Yes.
header. Cool, thanks.
So, but to answer your question, you cannot use it in another custom control. You have to use list view with grouping and long list selector in the previous Windows Phone Silverlight version.
Gotcha. Cool, thanks.
I just had a question about the continuum animation. You specified your exit and your enter fields. Can you have multiple exit and enter fields, or is it a single field?
You can have multiple exit fields, and what the system does is it detects what was pressed and tries to do the right fit based on that. So if you had like multiple controls that can be pressed and they trigger, so we kind of remember which, and let's say all of those had exit elements specified on that, so we'll try and remember which one of those was pressed and we'll fly out the right one. For the entrance, because there is no context for that kind of an information, so it is just one that you can see.
Yeah, I was wondering because like in the demo, you know, he added the enter to the name, and I was watching the name that was in the contact information below, but it was actually the name that was above the header that flew in. So I was wondering, could you have both of those fly in, or?
Yes, you can specify that exit element at different levels of the visual tree, and based on that, it'll pick up everything.
Well, no, this was the enter element on
The entrance element? Yeah.
on the detail screen. So on the detail, when he clicked that name on the list,
Right.
you saw the name fly out.
Right.
But when it was coming in, I was watching the name that was in the area below the header.
Right.
But it was actually the name that was in the header that flew in. So that's why I was wondering, could you have both of those fly in, or you can only have one element that can fly in?
We can follow up offline and look at the code, but generally, I think generally we would not expect people to do something where they specify multiple entrance targets, because it might look a little confusing to the user if they see multiple elements flying at the same time.
Right.
So generally the recommendation is you specify only one entrance target. So that's a much cleaner animation. Yeah.
We can play with it if you want after.
Yeah, definitely we can look at the code in more detail, play with it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So my impression was that the common page navigation was injected on the frame. Is that right?
Yes, by default it's on frame.
Okay, so if I want to have a page without navigation transitions,
You can if you want to.
so my question is then, what is the recommended way to do that? Because I think I have to clear the transition collection somehow on the frame.
So just to clarify, the question is, what's the recommended way to turn off the page navigation transitions completely?
Well,
Or-
for a specific page.
For a specific page?
Perhaps an extended splash screen or something.
So for that, you'll have to do a little bit more work, because if you turn it off on the root frame, all the pages will stop having the animation. So you'll have to go and apply to the pages that you want the animation.
So if I want to have one page without transitions,
Yes, that's going
I
to
have
be.
to, okay.
it's
So I
going
have to
to be a
turn
little
off
bit-
all of them and then add them explicitly.
And it's by intent that we've not made it too simple, because the basic recommendation from our design team is, in general, we want the pages to have an animation.
okay.
But it's a good idea. Maybe we can look into something like a null transition info object.
Yeah, an
which kind
empty
of-
one or something.
We can look into that.
Because it's like
Do you have a scenario where you would generally like to do that?
yeah, extended splash screen.
Extended splash screen.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's interesting. So the extended splash screen, generally, do you create a XAML page for that?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's another way you can do that. What you can do is, when your application loads up, at that point, have your root.frame, the root frame transition set to null. And as soon as you navigate to the first page after that, go back and set the root frame.transitions back to the common navigation transition. So the first page will not get the animation, but as soon as you get out of the first page, because you will set it back into the root frame, every other page will start getting it back.
You know what? That's an awesome.
Thanks.
Hi. So for the truly custom animations, like the ones shown in the keynote, I noticed in Office and in Flipboard, it seemed like the teams decided to go native and use DirectX. And I was just curious, is that the recommendation from Microsoft, or is there any way to do those type of animations with XAML and CS?
So assume you went to a talk where they were talking about Office animations and how they went and used DirectX because there were some animations they wanted to do that were not available. So I've not been to that talk, but in case they said, so this is, the recommendation generally is that you first try and use something which is available in the signature animations. The first attempt should be, is something that is in the signature animations useful to me? If not that, then as I described, we also have the custom animation APIs, which are same as Windows 8.1 and Windows 8, where you can actually create a lot of different kind of effects like bounce ease. You can have your own timeline, and you can specify what kind of like exact storyboard you want. So that would be the next step, trying and doing something with that animation API set. And only if something doesn't fall into either of these categories, which is at this point we don't expect to be very common, then yes, maybe if that's possible the way Office did it, then sure. But this would be the order where you look for.
Is there any way to mix basically those DirectX libraries with like a current XAML and CS project?
So you mentioned, so I'm not aware of it, but you mentioned Office did that.
I just heard it in the keynote.
Pardon?
I just heard it in the keynote. That's what they did.
Okay. I'm not sure if there is a public way to do that.
Cool.
All right. Thanks so much for coming to this last session on the last day. Have a great weekend.